The agenda. Yes. Hang on to that. I'll tell you why in a minute.
Yeah,
I already told you.
yeah, I think the last one was like there was like 2-3 people here.
So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Richard Haskell. I work for the firm of WGI, a consulting engineering firm, and we're retained by the city of Lake Worth Beach to oversee and manage the entire $40 million 4-year bond program. That's my role here this evening. The reason I wanted to point out to everyone the importance of that agenda is the footnotes. We're going to, at some point this evening, we're going to ask you to give us some feedback as to any specific problems on your street that you see that we may not be aware of. We need that because, again, you live on the streets, you see what happens on the streets every day. If there's speeding, if there's flooding, if there are people walking in the street for lack of sidewalks, all that sort of thing. You see it every day. That's the kind of thing that, I mean, we can get a general idea when we drive the streets, but that's the kind of feedback that we really need from the residents, which is one of the main reasons that we have these meetings. Tom Biggs is with us tonight. He's with the firm of Mock Bruce and Associates. Mock Bruce is the district engineer for District 1. So they are in the process of doing the construction plans for this work. And as soon as I get done talking here, Tom's going to take you through a brief description of what's proposed to happen and what the scope of the projects are, and take you through what's going on some of the blocks. We're about 50% done with the plans, which is where we'd like to be when we have these meetings, so that we can give you an idea of what to expect. There's a lot more work to be done. We also don't want to get too far into the plans before we get your feedback to see if there's any other issues that we need to address or that we can possibly address in the design. Okay, so we're going to do that, and Tom's going to give you a presentation, and then we've got a little board that we're going to ask you to vote on. We'll take you through that when we get to that point. It's got some features on it that will help us to identify some basic major issues or concerns that the consensus of the neighborhood might have. You being the neighborhood, you came today. And thank you for coming out in the rain. I appreciate it. So, also with us tonight is Giles. Stand up. Giles is with the City Utilities Department. He's a utility engineer. And Michael David. Mike is an integral component of this whole program. He is I'm the program manager for the entire program. Mike is the project manager for the city who oversees the field construction of all of these projects. So he's a busy guy too. So he's an important cog in this machine. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and let him take you through the basics of the projects. Then we'll open it up for Q&A, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Let me just, I'm going to get closer to you with this because you can't see, I can barely see it, so I'm going to get closer. So, this is District 1, Year 4 projects. This is where everything's going to be done in District 1 in Year 4. The pink stuff that's up here is Project 1, and the rest of these pieces is Project 2, and that's what we're here to talk about, is Project 2 tonight. But I just want you to know that there's also another part in the district going to be done early, it'll start a little before yours starts under construction. So, what are the colors? Project 2, roadway only, is this dark green one on Montague Street, and here a little piece of it on Southeast Street. Water utilities only, this purple, you can see, so there's going to be water utilities in these corridors, and roadway and water both in these lighter green corridors, like on Lakeview, Hillcrest, and and up here at Royal Palm Drive, and I missed some of these over here. But anyway, so again, the dark green is roadway only on Elm Street and South Ridge. and Sunrise, and on Oil Palm Drive, there's water and roadway. So that, essentially, that's what we're proposing to do. All of these have, these pinker streets are more, easier roadway construction, an overlay, kind of things. These are more in-depth construction. Project 2, they have to be more detailed drawings, and they will be bid. So they're, from the time from where we're at now, the city's got, is being delivered 50% drawings on these projects tomorrow. And then with your input and their comments, then we will proceed to complete the drawings. Then the projects will go out to bid. The city has a procurement process for bidding and awarding the work, and then early next year sometime, that's when the construction will likely start for these projects. Any questions? I guess it's time for questions, and if
Okay, what is this
something-
gonna consist of? Putting new asphalt down?
It's good, well, no, it's gonna be,
Putting curbs in?
if there's broken curbs or missing curbs or inadequate curbs, there'll be new curbs. If the existing curbs are salvageable, they will stay. Same with sidewalk. If it's broken sidewalk, missing
No
sidewalk.
drainage.
If there are specific drainage issues, we try to address them. That's one of the things you
Yeah.
need you to tell us on your street. If there are
Well, my
specific.
street, there's no curb, so there's no drainage.
So likely what we will be doing, and I have to look at the typical sections.
You can look at your street.
Likely what we will be doing is putting curbs of some fashion on the street to solve the drainage problems. It could be, it depends on the existing elevations on the street. It could be an F curb, which is a curb that you see downtown that has the 6-inch reveal on it. It could be a mountable gutter, which serves the same purpose, but, you know, it depends on what the existing grade is that we have to match. So there are different kinds of curbs and gutters that we can use. It just depends on the specific street. Sidewalks, the goal of the program is to provide continuous pedestrian, continuous pedestrian path on at least one side of the streets. Now, we've by and large been doing that. Some of the streets in the older parts of town, for example, where the first, we call it the Wishbone Project, I'll explain what that is to you. In that part of town, most of the sidewalks and curbs are there. So what we'll do is there may be some gaps in sidewalks, so we'll fill in gaps, and we will repair sidewalks that are broken, cracked, they're tripping hazards, they're ADA issues, things like that. ADA is American Disabilities. So those are the kinds of things we're doing on the street. Whether we completely reconstruct the street, in other words, dig it all out and replace the subgrade, replace the base, and then put new asphalt on it, et cetera, or whether we just mill and resurface it, those determinations are being made in the course of the design work here, and they're very much a function of the results of the geotechnical testing that we've done, the cores and the streets that we've done. Michael also has a lot of input into that because of his experience in road construction. So that's kind of a determination that we'll make as we go along, when we get to the point of the project, we'll know basically what we're doing. And that's gonna determine when the curbs go in.
I had asphalt down my street 20 years ago, to make it funny work.
Sure.
To me, down far enough, and put new asphalt. They just threw asphalt on top of it.
Well,
That's gonna make a,
that's why we like to put curbs in, even if there are no curbs now, because
yeah, I'd rather have a curb.
it gives you a constant flow line for the water to go someplace.
Right.
So you don't have this kind of thing going on the edge of the street.
Unless you have some swale section.
Unless you have a swale section, right, but most of the, well, in this project that we're talking about tonight, down in here, your streets are a little bit different. The right-of-ways are a little wider. You probably got swale sections rather than curbs, okay? So that's a little different. We'll go in there, and if we've identified ponding or flooding issues, we will try and solve them with reestablishing swales if they filled in. We have some neighborhoods in that area, a little bit north of you, that we've worked on during construction actually this year, that there's a green space between the edge of the road and the sidewalk that used to be a swale, but over the years it's filled in, so it just goes flat back up. So what we'll do is we'll go in there and we will redevelop the swale as best we can. We try not to take out anybody's shrubbery, palm trees or whatever's out there, but we'll try and redevelop the swale as best we can to solve some of those ponding and drainage issues. Now, just joining us is J.B. Brown. He is the Public Services Director for the city, one of the head decision makers. That's why he doesn't let me tell you what his phone number is. So that's basically what the program is all about. Okay, it was established to address the needs of the worst streets in the city. There was a study done back in 2013, and it was revisited in 2016. If some of you were here that far back, you know there was an initial attempt at doing a bond project, but it was much larger in scope. Did not pass the referendum, so then in 2016 in November, the scaled down program did pass the referendum, so that's what we're doing these last 4 years. But the roads were all ranked in that study on a scale from 0 to 100. And that 0 to 100 was characterized as something called a pavement condition index, a PCI. So the program, given the magnitude of the dollars that was available, $40 million, it was determined that that would only go so far. So a PCI of 60, if you will, was the cutoff for that. So anything with a PCI in that report above 60 is not addressed in this program unless the segment corresponded time-wise with the city's capital improvement plan for utilities. So we're also incorporating streets in the program that dovetail time-wise, again, with the city's water main upgrade program. So when Tom said that there are some streets here that are strictly roadway segments, some are strictly water segments, and some are a combination of both, okay? That's why some of those streets are in there. So you may see a street that's getting torn up and it's having a water main put in, but it looks like it's in much better condition than the street, you know, in another neighborhood that's not being addressed, which is probably the truth. But it's going in because of the water main. And so those folks will get the benefit of probably not a reconstructed street, because by definition the street's not in that bad a condition, but they will likely get the benefit of having a resurfaced street as restoration from the water main installation, depending on where the water main goes.
So, excuse me, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Mhm.
Like on 15th Avenue and G Street, I don't see where anything was colored on that. Will you be doing anything with that
This
area?
would be like right here, 15th and G, and South G.
Right.
So that is water utilities only.
Those are water main installation projects.
Okay.
So
Because
again,
we do
the water
have-
mains will be going in, depending on whether they are able to go in the street, if they have to go in the street, or if there's a green area, a swale, if you will, outside the street, which is yet to be determined. That'll happen in the design process, what the alignment is.
Mhm.
But if it's in the street, then more than likely you'll end up with at least a resurfaced street. Because we can't spend, by bond covenant, we can't spend bond money on streets that fell below that weren't identified as bond segments in that report.
Mhm.
So,
Well, what about the sidewalk?
I'm sorry?
Because like the sidewalk in front of my house is starting to raise up, it's cracked, it's really a hazard for people that's walking, because it's starting to raise up, basically the ground is pushing it up, and it's all cracked up.
yeah, we can take a look at those issues,
Mhm.
and I'll be absolutely identified to us. And if we can address them, we will. All right?
What's a water main?
I'm sorry?
Water main, you place in pipes.
Yes.
Pipes,
Yeah.
in the street.
distribution.
A lot of it, well, the city has an ongoing 2-inch water main upgrade program. They're in, what, phase 4?
We're constructing phase 4 and designing phases 5 and 6.
Yes, they're designed phase 5 and 6. And that's in various districts throughout the city where they have 2-inch water mains in the alleys. and they're either upgrading the mains and the alleys, or they're converting them to the streets and moving people's services out to the streets with either 6 or 8 inch mains. It improves the quality of your service, improves the pressure at your home, and it also significantly improves your fire protection. So those are all things that factor into that. If the segment, and the reason I mention this, it has more to do with the funding that we have to concern ourselves with than it does with the actual road improvement requirement. The segments that are identified as road and water means that there's a water main upgrade in the program to go down there, but the street was also, had a low enough PSI that it fit into the program. So what happens there is the water main goes in, and the water account pays for that construction and a basic trench repair. Then the bond program goes in and pays for the complete resurface, whatever has to happen to the road and the sidewalks and all that stuff. The segments that are identified as water only are segments where water main is going in with the current year's capital program, but it's going in streets that are not bond segments. In other words, they were not in bad enough condition to get into the program. So whatever improvements are done on that street will typically get funded by the water account. So we have to track those very carefully as we go through the projects. Because if the city gets audited at some point in time in the future about the bond money, then they have to be able to show that they didn't spend bond money on anything but bond expenses. So that's the reasoning behind that.
So when you start putting down the water pipes and stuff like that, would we have to worry about parking our vehicles elsewhere, or?
More for the road construction, I would think, than the water. The contractors will be passing out door to door, just like the notices that you got. They'll be passing those out in advance of any construction activity that goes on. Typically what they do is they'll go out when they're getting ready to start, and they'll pass out a notice that says, we're gonna be working on your road from now until, next Christmas. That doesn't mean that your road's gonna be torn up from now until next Christmas, okay? That just tells you that they're going to start the project, okay?
Okay.
And what they're going to do 24 to 48 hours in advance of starting any particular activity is they're going to pass out additional notices that are going to tell you date from to. It's going to be a window. It's going to be a window of dates, because there are any number of things that can, like this, that can impact a construction schedule, okay? So they can't be so specific that they are not able to be flexible enough to deal with rain delays or equipment downtime or whatever. So they're gonna give you a time window, okay? And they're gonna tell you, during that time window, some point during that time window, they're gonna come out and they're going to be demolishing sidewalks, curbs, forming and pouring curbs or sidewalks, or building the street or whatever. Whatever activity they're doing that requires parking restrictions, they're gonna tell you what those parking restrictions are. Now, when they do that, you need to understand that, because the form you're gonna get is kind of a checkbox fill in the blank, because it's trilingual. So frankly, we couldn't afford to have as many of those go out translated. So it's kind of a check the box, fill in the blank type of thing. And there's not room for it to be very specific. So what you need to understand is that any restrictions, any parking or access restrictions, are only for the working periods, which are Monday through Friday from 8 to 6. So it coincides with the city's noise ordinance. The contractors are obligated to restore access, not only to the street, but to your residents at the end of the workday. The only exception to that is if they happen to be pouring concrete, whether it's a curb or a sidewalk, that has to cure. They may tell you there may be a one day or a one evening restriction of parking in your driveway, because you have to drive across the curb or the sidewalk to get to your driveway. Other than that, there are no restrictions when they're not working after hours. And those are the working hours for the contractors unless specifically authorized by the city. Now, if they get towards the end of the project and they're having a time issue, sometimes. In fact, we just did that last weekend out here on North Grade Elementary School. We had done L Street, 8th Avenue, right behind the school, and it was all done except for paving, and the school was starting. And the contractor schedule was problematic. So he was out there Saturday paving it, which it worked. That's going to happen sometimes, depending on the circumstance and what's happening on the street, and where he is in his schedule, just, things like that. So be prepared for that. If the construction it's very important to understand that the construction is not segment driven. And by that I mean the contractor's not going to go in and work on this piece of street until everything is done, because he's got segments all over town. You can see how many segments he's going to be working under. So it's not segment driven, it's process driven. So he's going to come in, he's going to have his crews go through, for example, and they'll do demolition on the sidewalks if the sidewalks are coming out. And they'll do demolitions on curb if the curb is coming out. The first thing that will happen if you're on a segment that is getting a water main is the water main's going to go in the ground, obviously. So they may come in and do those processes, and then you don't see them for a week or two. That means that their crews are out doing the same thing on other segments. They will be back. Okay, they haven't gone bankrupt, they're not out of town. They will be back. We do our best to minimize that gap, if you will, between the time something is demolished and it's restored. We've had issues in earlier years with inordinate amounts of time passing, where streets have been torn up and have not been at least restored to passable traffic, where curbs have been demolished and sat there for over a month. And we do our best to address that with the contractor so that it doesn't happen. Most of the time we're successful, sometimes it takes a little bit of pushing. But that's something that you can expect. And it's an inconvenience to the residents, we understand that, and again, we try to minimize that as best we can working with the contractor. What else can I tell you? We have two projects in the district in this year. One of them is what we call a push button project. Push button project is a project that we can go to commission fairly quickly and have a contract award to one of 5 contractors that were selected at the beginning of the program through a competitive bid process. So there is a laundry list of road-related items with unit prices and things like that. So there's 5 contractors. So when I get the quantities from the engineer for those push button contracts, I plug them into the matrix, and whichever contractor comes out, of those contractors comes out lowest at the bottom, we then go to staff and we put it on the agenda for contract award, because the contracts that we're working with are already awarded through the competitive process. Every now and again, we'll have just some minor utility work, one of those, but not very often. The project that has a lot of the water main work, utility work, those segments are lumped together. They seem kind of disjointed. Why are they all over the place? They're kind of lumped together because of the underground work and the fact that we need to competitively bid those projects. So it takes longer to get a contract awarded. That's about a 2.5 month process. So the push button projects, the ones in red, are going to start sooner than the bid projects, which have the water mains, et cetera, to go in there. We like to try and start the projects and get contracts awarded November, December for the push button projects, and January or so, late January at the latest for the bid projects, so that we can actually start construction the first of the year, well, one of the first 2 months of the year. We like to start the push button projects in January after the holidays, and we don't like to push the bid projects much past February. So that's the generic timing. We don't know exactly what it's going to be yet, obviously, because we don't have a full set of plans to see what the overall scope is. Time-wise, I would expect, just from our experiences thus far, that this push button project here, with the red that you see, is probably 6 to 7 month project, time-wise. The bid project that has the underground utilities, that's going to be a longer term project, because the road obviously can't start until the underground goes in. So that may be 9 months, 9 to 10 months. Which is why we like to get started as early as we can in the year, because, well, for the last 3 years, we've tried not to have years overlap. Not so successful the first 2 years. This year has been better. And that's why we like to start the construction as early in the year of that program as it's scheduled in, so that it doesn't overlap into the following year. This actually is the last year of the program. So actually, this is kind of a milestone for us tonight. This is the last neighborhood meeting of the entire program, because this is the final year. Jamie's sweating. Yes.
Could you put in a bid for the speed bump on Elm?
Sure.
Because they already put the pipes in and they haven't resurfaced the street yet.
Yeah, we can take a look at that, again, in the design.
Yeah.
And those are the things that we want to hear from you tonight. We have kind of a basic idea based on the studies that we've done, and the geotechnical reports that testing that we've done, and the survey work that we have. We have a pretty good idea of what the street needs in terms of bringing it back to a serviceable condition that will last for another 20 or so years. But, you know, again, if you have flooding issues, if you have speeding issues, it's a particular one that we get a lot. We're actually going to convert, on this project here, we're going to convert F Street to a one-way street with this project. Right?
That's the plan.
It's the only street over there that's not a one-way street. And what happens is, on these long stretches of street, we address speeding issues on some of these streets with speed humps or bump outs or, you know, chokers, whatever. There are a number of features that we can put in the design to try and control the speed, just depending on what the situation or problem is. What happens is that because of the way the program is structured, we're addressing each street individually. We're not addressing the entire neighborhood. So what happens is when we get done with a project and we've got speed bumps in there, that takes the speeders off of that street, moves over to the next street. So it's kind of problematic at that point.
Yeah, because
But the city's aware of that. That's something that they're going to be continuing to look at in the future.
15th and G Street, I would swear there in, what's the, Indy 500 or whatever, the speed, oh my God. And you have the little kids out there playing, and
Sure.
it's, oh my God, race, no
Well,
kid has really gotten smashed.
We've had segments of streets in districts 3 and 4 over here on the east side of town. One-way streets, north or south. And before we started the program, we looked at these street segments and we realized that you could, and they're one-way streets, that you could go for 6 or 8 or 9 blocks without hitting a stop sign. I mean, it was an invitation to speed. So where we had projects that abutted those streets, particularly that involved those streets, we did exactly that. We tried to break up the streets and not have a continuous length of street without a stop sign for more than 3 blocks. So we've implemented stop signs at intersections, and we've put in speed humps. And what works really well for us on one-way streets is bump outs at intersections. It does 2 things. It narrows the road, and there's a natural tendency for the driver to slow down when that perception comes to it that the street is narrow. And the other thing it does is there's, on one-way streets, there are parking aisles on both sides. So it tends to protect the parking aisle. And it keeps people from parking where they're not supposed to park within 20 feet of an intersection, because it creates a sight distance issue.
Yeah, when they bump it out.
Yeah, see, something like that.
Yeah.
That's basically a summary of the program and where we are and what we plan to do at this point, based on the information we have. Of course, the plans are developing. Do you have any questions before we get into the voting booth here?
I do a couple. When you reroute the water down the front, is the line picked up in the house by the city then to pick up a feed going into the house then from the new meters?
Yeah,
Is that how that
if
works?
the existing water main is in an alley behind you,
Or backyard?
and we're putting the water main in the front in the street, part of that project is to relocate your service from the back to the front.
Okay.
That's part of this, it's included in the cost of the project, so there's no cost to you. The contractor will have a plumbing sub who will work with each individual homeowner, pull a permit and contact each individual homeowner and, you know, to run the line. Okay, most of the time, 99% of the time, they do it with directional drills, so they don't have to trench per yard. And then what they will do is they will, when they get all connected up, when the new water system is pressure tested, chlorinated, and is bacteriologically cleared by the health department for connection, they will come back, again, in coordination with you. It's the only time you may be out of water for an hour, so how long it takes, is they will disconnect you from the line in the back, the smaller line in the back. They'll move your meter out to the front and connect you there, and then they will abandon the line in
On
the
the
back.
back.
Yeah.
Also on Lakeview, I'm on there, we don't have a real curb, we have the recessed curb, you know, below the ground, I guess like a collar.
Header curve.
Header curve.
And they'll stay in place then, if they're in good shape, just asphalt. We have the swale, we get perfect draining.
Yeah, more than likely. I mean, we try to be careful about how many existing improvements we're taking out. Again, because of the need to be cost effective and how we're spending that money.
If it's not broke,
Yeah, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So, for example, if there are existing sidewalks that there's nothing wrong with, or curbs, unless there's another reason to take them out, for example, if the grades on the street have to change to solve some drainage issues, sometimes the curbs may have to come out even though they're in good condition, just to get positive drainage flows. But again, those are things that the engineers will tell us when they go through the design.
also, I'll use up all my time. Preston High Ridge, that floods like a sieve. And as you go around, it becomes Cochran again, and Lake Osborne, those flood. They're below grade there though. You know, we drain well, but they flood. And speaking of the speeding between Cochran and Lake Osborne, comes around to the west, becomes Crest, the High Ridge. There's nothing to slow people down. I've heard, I don't, but that's a speedway there.
It's good things, that's the kind of things you need to know.
You said 9 blocks, this beach are 9 blocks.
One of the things that you may notice, where Ramsey intersects Cochran, just north of 12th Avenue, just west of railroad tracks, across the street from the church.
Black.
Yeah, you had that intersection that came down like this.
Yep.
And there was all kinds of, there was a sea of asphalt there. And folks in the neighborhood told us that they were having an issue not only with cut-through traffic, but with cut-through like semi-traffic. Because the way that intersection was designed, the semi, 56-foot trailer could make that turn real easily and go down, I guess,
On
no.
Sixth, you know.
So that's what they're doing now. Okay. And we're gonna put a speed bump on the street front. We're gonna make, along with putting speed bumps on most of the, most of the north-south streets. When you do that, we have to be careful there, else you have that. We've got speed bumps on Cochran, but we're also doing, I think, Barber section up the street there that goes on to Sixth. And we're looking at possibly putting a speed bump there. I had to call for a resident out there as well. Like I said, that's a cut through. So, yeah, those are the kinds of things that we do want to look at, and we do want to get the input from you.
Yeah,
So-
on my lot, when the rain's heavy, all the debris sits on top of the drains. And so my neighbor and I, we go out and clean the drains ourselves, and then it sits there, and another rain comes and it gets more, you know, and more, but sometimes we can't get out there, you know, it's raining too hard.
We need to give a break on the stormwater because they're cleaning the system for you.
Yeah, and there's so much junk, and then, you know, you could see how high the water is
Sure.
down there, so nobody comes to clean it. Once in a while, I'll see somebody, you know, they come with those things that they look around, all that debris, and you see all that junk and slime.
And the city does have, you guys have a VACCON, don't you?
Mhm.
Yeah. They've got one
Who's
VACCON and they,
who takes care of that?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
It's,
Takes care of
it's
that
with
back
the water utility department.
Yeah, and you from the water utilities?
Yes.
Okay, Do you come around regularly to do that, or do you check to see that the drains are, are cleaned? Because a lot of that debris, from the leaves and grass and everything goes in there. And then, of course, people come with the cars and they open the window, throw their beer cans and, and it's just, and it's so filthy, and the water doesn't go through and, come out from where it's supposed to come out. It sits there.
Yeah, I think.
So we have a running maintenance program where we try to go through and inspect and clean all the sumps that exist at the bottom of the catch basins.
Yeah,
But there are a lot of
There are
storm
a lot,
drains
yeah.
throughout the city, so it's a slow process to get through the whole entire system. And the guys, at every storm event, they try to get in their cars and drive around and see what is showing to be backing up or not working.
yeah.
And that gives us some of our greatest hints.
The
of what we
the
can
neighbors,
address.
Yeah.
we get out there and clean it because we try to get that water, because a lot of homes there, they sit on the ground, so the water, comes into their homes,
And yes, you're
it's
near Elm and,
on Elm and Royal
Royal
Pond
Pond
Drive.
Still the Royal Pond.
The street is being repaired now, they put the pipes in,
Mhm.
that's why before resurfacing, I wanted the bump there, because that's the speed to get on A Street, so they can catch that light on Sixth Avenue, so they can get on I-95,
Right,
and you
yeah.
have this backup, and the traffic is
We'll
terrible.
take a look
They
at
should
the,
have a
Yep.
light, a light that, a direction, where you can make a left turn, so you can get onto Sixth Avenue, because sometimes only one car gets through on that
Mhm.
corner. People are trying to get to work, and you can't get on, it's horrible. And they had a meeting a couple of years back, nothing was done, nothing was done.
yeah, that intersection's very constrained.
Yeah, and then so they speed down Elm Street so they can catch, A Street and catch that light before it turns red again,
Mhm.
because you have to give way to the cars going south on A Street.
right,
And they take their time, and then by the time they finish coming over from north to south, you've got these cars from the south trying to, only one car may get through sometimes.
the traffic issue at that intersection that you're describing is not something that we're gonna be able to address with this program. Speed control is, if that will help, in some form or fashion on Royal Palm or Elm.
Yeah,
We will certainly try and do that. We'll take a look at the existing drainage out there, and we'll try and determine whether or not it's adequate, or if it's just a maintenance issue. The problem that the city has, I know from firsthand experience, I was environmental services director in Delray Beach for 16 years, and we had similar systems and maintenance programs, is that there are so many drainage facilities throughout the city, which is hard to believe when we look on some of these streets and there are no drainage.
there are 3 on that corner.
But, yeah, there are so many of them, and the city's resources to maintain them they're not very, as Giles said, I mean, they got maybe one vac on, and they got the entire city, so there is a maintenance program, but it just takes that one vehicle so long to get around. Now, if they have a crisis, they can go out and they can have Shenandoah or a sub that comes in and does that.
There
at
used to
additional
be a
expense.
street cleaner, a truck that used to come around.
They have a street cleaner.
And I haven't seen a truck, the street cleaning truck in I don't know how long. And they would take away all these leaves and debris that would be along the sidewalk, so this way, it wasn't that bad. But then all of a sudden, those trucks, you don't see them anymore, and those drains get clogged. And, like,
Sorry, you had a question?
I was hoping that on the website that is on the road, you can upload pictures of comments or requests to that website, but I didn't.
Yes,
I tried to-
let me, at the bottom, this is the reason I wanted you to make sure you had a copy of this agenda. At the bottom, there is a website address, a URL, lakeworthroads.com, and there's a telephone number on the bottom right. Both of those, you can leave a message on the hotline, telephone message, or you can send an email through the website. There's a place on there that tells you how to contact staff, actually me. Vincent back here, who's manning the videotape, which will be posted, by the way, in the next week or so on the website. He monitors both the hotline and the email coming into that website. And whatever comes in on a daily basis, he transcribes the hotline, puts together the emails, he puts a nice little report together for me, and he sends it to my inbox. So if you leave a message on the hotline, or if you send an email in a short order, that's gonna come straight to me. And if I can, I will make sure you get a response. It may not be from me, particularly if we get into the construction, and you may have construction issues. Sometimes I'm not the best person to respond to a construction issue because I don't spend a lot of time in the field. So I may defer it to either the contractor or staff or Michael or whoever, but I will make sure that you do get a response. And in the early stage here, where we're still in the design stage, by all means, use that, and please talk to your neighbors that aren't here this evening. Use that and tell them to use that to communicate with us, and I will get those, and I pass any comments that you may have, or any suggestions that you may have, or any issues that you may raise on your street. I will look at those, review them with staff, and we'll give them to the design engineers. And we'll get together and see if and how we can solve those issues with the project. Anything else? Okay, let's vote.
Good luck. Good luck.
I have a question
Hope everything
also.
turns out
On
okay.
on those pump outs, is going to be grass or is going to be concrete all the way through?
The bump outs typically are done with a colored pattern concrete.
Right, okay. And sometimes I see like a palm tree in the middle or something like that.
Every now and again,
You
we
put
try
reflectors
to,
around it.
we try to minimum, yeah, we do put reflectors on the
So you
curb,
don't
so you can
hit-
see them, yeah.
Yeah.
We try to minimize
I
the
know.
expense from the bond on street trees, because it's really not what the money was there for. Some segments, because of the manner in which the PCIs were established, which I wasn't involved in the report, and I don't want to say bad things about the engineer, but it leaves you scratching your head sometimes. We had year 1 and year 2 segments that would seem to indicate that the roads were in very bad condition. And when we went out to see what needed to be done, we're like, wrong with the road. Sidewalks are fine, curbs are fine. So in some areas, but the problem is if the segment was identified in the bond, because in the referendum, the segments were listed. When you went out and voted in the referendum, all the segments were listed. So by virtue of the segments being specifically identified in the bond, that means that we have to address and do something on the segment. So what we have done on some segments that really didn't need any structural work is we created some bump outs, some chokers, and we added some trees, in coordination with the neighborhood. But again, we try to minimize that because that really doesn't do anything to structurally improve the streets that need it.
Yeah, but that's great for the school zone, but it's having, they're having, that's the school zone, and people have to slow down.
Right.
So it's great.
Okay. Tom's gonna give you some stickies.
Purple and blue.
He's gonna give you blue stickies and purple stickies. And we've broken this up into 2 broad categories, streetscape